Scientists recently made a breakthrough with this question, so let's talk about it. Could we clone a dinosaur today? If you asked this question 10 years ago, the answer would have been an absolute no. At that time, we didn't know if we could clone a mammal, let alone a reptile. But today, things are much different. In 2009, scientists cloned a dog for the first time. And in 2016, they cloned 2 monkeys, which up until then had never been done before. The reason why cloning mammals is so complicated has to do with something called genomic imprinting. This is when a gene is expressed differently depending on whether it was inherited from the mother or the father. Take, for example, the IGF2R gene. If this gene is inherited from the mother, it gets silenced. But if it comes from the father, it gets turned on. Scientists don't exactly know how all of this works, but they have narrowed it down to certain chemical modifications to the DNA. After a lot of trial and error, scientists were finally able to clone a monkey by correcting these epigenetic marks. But even though we can now clone mammals, dinosaurs are a completely different story. The biggest issue with cloning dinosaurs is that we can't find their DNA. The oldest piece of dino DNA that scientists have found is around 1 million years old. But unfortunately, that's nowhere near being usable. To use DNA for cloning purposes, it needs to be in a relatively good condition. For example, take this woolly mammoth steppe. It was found in Siberia in 1997. At the time, scientists thought it was perfectly preserved ice, but it turned out to be a mixture of ice and ground-up bone. Over the years, more and more pieces of mammoth remains have been discovered. And today we have enough material to fully sequence its genome. The big difference between the woolly mammoth and the dinosaurs is that the mammoth went extinct only 4,000 years ago, whereas dinosaurs went extinct around 66 million years ago. That's 16 million times longer. In 2023, scientists did something pretty incredible. They found a new way to extract dinosaur DNA from rocks. First, they collected rock samples from Montana and Wyoming. These rocks contain dino bones and are around 76 million years old. Next, they used a technique known as micro-drilling to extract small amounts of rock powder. Using this powder, they were able to identify small traces of dinosaur DNA. This is pretty amazing considering that the last time scientists tried this, they couldn't even find any traces of dino DNA. Their previous method involved crushing up the rocks, which ends up contaminating the sample with a lot of debris. But this new micro-drilling technique is extremely precise. So what does this mean for cloning dinosaurs? Well, right now, scientists can't yet use this DNA to clone dinosaurs. They're still trying to figure out if the DNA they extracted is good enough to use. But what they want to do next is use this DNA to fill in the gaps of the bird's genome. Birds are the closest living relatives of dinosaurs, sharing a common ancestor around 300 million years ago. All birds alive today descended from this common ancestor, meaning that every single bird species is technically a dinosaur. But over the eons, they've evolved into many different shapes, sizes, and colors. To understand what I mean, let's take a look at the platypus. The platypus is a strange creature. It lays eggs, has a duckbill, webbed feet, and is venomous. It's also a mammal, which makes it pretty unique. In fact, it's one of only 5 mammals that lay eggs. But you might be wondering, how can we know if something is a mammal if it lays eggs? Mammals are defined by 3 key characteristics. They have hair or fur. They produce milk to feed their young, and they are warm-blooded. Now, the platypus checks off all of these boxes. It has a coat of soft, dense fur. It produces milk to feed its babies, and it can regulate its own body temperature. So despite laying eggs, the platypus is considered a mammal. Now let's take a look at chickens. Chickens are birds, but like the platypus, they also check off all the boxes for being a dinosaur. Chickens have feathers instead of fur, but feathers are just modified versions of hair, and some birds, like ostriches, have feathers that are so thick that they can't be seen. Chickens also produce milk. They have special milk glands in their throats that secrete milk to feed their babies. Lastly, chickens are warm-blooded. They can regulate their body temperature and keep it around 40 degrees Celsius. Basically, birds are just dinosaurs that have evolved to survive on land. Dinosaurs used to be great at flying, but over the eons they've evolved to be better at running, hiding, and climbing trees. Now, scientists believe that if they were to modify the genes of a chicken, they could turn it into a sort of Jurassic Park special edition. But here's the thing. You can't just go changing genes without knowing what those genes do. Like, imagine if someone took a chicken gene and inserted it into a human. Would that human have webbed fingers? Maybe. Or maybe it would be completely harmless. Scientists just don't know. But thanks to this new discovery, they can study dinosaur genes to get a better understanding of how they work. And who knows? Maybe someday they'll even be able to clone a dinosaur. One argument against cloning dinosaurs is that since they went extinct 66 million years ago, it doesn't really matter if we bring them back or not. In other words, cloning dinosaurs wouldn't benefit humans in any significant way. On the contrary, bringing back dinosaurs could cause massive damage to the ecosystem. Dinosaurs would compete with modern animals for food and habitat and would pose a threat to many species. Plus, cloning dinosaurs would be an expensive endeavor. It would require millions of dollars and it might not even work. So it's probably a bad idea to put all our efforts into cloning dinosaurs when there are so many other important issues facing humanity, like climate change, poverty, and disease. But even though cloning dinosaurs may not directly benefit us, it would definitely benefit science. Scientists would get a better understanding of evolution and be able to learn more about how animals adapt to their surroundings. Some people say that we shouldn't interfere with nature and that if we have the ability to clone dinosaurs, we shouldn't do it. But I disagree. Humans have been interfering with nature for thousands of years. We selectively breed plants and animals for certain traits, and we've even changed the weather and climate of the planet. And honestly, that's not going to stop. Even if we stopped all of our polluting and global warming efforts, the world would still be a very different place than it was 100 years ago. Cars wouldn't exist, planes wouldn't exist, and most importantly, you wouldn't exist. Progress is inevitable. And whether you like it or not, we're going to continue changing the world. So instead of worrying about what will happen when we clone a dinosaur, we should be excited about the opportunities that lie ahead. Who knows? Maybe one day we'll live in a world where humans and dinosaurs live side by side. There are also a lot of unknowns when it comes to cloning dinosaurs. We don't know if they would be friendly or if they would attack us. We also don't know how they would interact with other animals or how they would impact the environment. But I think that these are exciting questions that scientists should try to answer. By cloning dinosaurs, we would be taking a huge leap forward in terms of scientific knowledge. It would allow us to study these amazing creatures up close and personal and learn about their behavior, biology, and evolution. Some people also worry that cloning dinosaurs would be unethical. They argue that we do not have the right to bring these creatures back just for our own amusement or profit. But I disagree. I think that if we're ever able to clone a dinosaur, it would be a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to learn about these amazing creatures. The knowledge that we would gain from studying dinosaurs would far outweigh any ethical concerns. What do you guys think? Should we clone dinosaurs? Comment below. And as always, thanks for watching.